What's going on, guys? Tix here with the Token Minorities, bringing you another deck on Pokemon TCGO, and today I am bringing you a deck centered around Donald Trump EX, Gumshoos-GX. And before I get into the deck, just a reminder that if you guys like this video or found it helpful, please leave a like, drop a comment, and maybe subscribe. It really does help us out a lot, and lets us do more for you guys. And as for the question of the day, I already alluded to it a little bit already, but Gumshoos has an undeniable striking resemblance to one Donald Trump. I mean, you got the hairpiece right here, you have the fact that when he stands he puts his hands behind his back in kind of a formal pose, and then even more subtly you have these little hair pieces along Gumshoos' chest which make it look like they're lapels of a suit. So really, I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on whether this was intentional or whether or not it was just probably the coincidence of the century. If you had to ask me, I would say the design of Gumshoos was a total hold my beer moment. For those of you that don't understand what that means, let me explain. So generally a hold my beer moment is when you and a friend are drinking beer and your friend dares you to do something really stupid, so you, a little bit intoxicated already, respond with hold my beer while you accept the dare and go do something stupid. So my theory on why Gumshoos looks like Donald Trump as much as it does is because I theorized that while they were designing Pokemon for Sun and Moon, one of the creators turned to Ken Sugimori and said, "Hey Ken, I bet you can't create a Pokemon that is based on Donald Trump," to which Ken replied, "Hold my beer," and thus created Gumshoos. So yeah, that is my little crackpot theory as to why Gumshoos looks so much like Donald Trump. Let me know what your guys' theories are in the comments section below and a little bit of explanation behind it, or just tell me if you think it's a coincidence and why. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. But anyway, on to the actual deck and not the tinfoil hat theories. Like I said, centered around Gumshoos-GX, 210 HP, so pretty bulky. It's pretty nice having that good amount of HP in a normal type, so not the greatest but not the worst. Basically this card has a solid GX attack of phenomenal ability and then a mediocre attack. So really Gumshoos is, I'm very torn as to how good I think it is. Does it have use in some decks? Yes, I believe so. However, I really was having trouble trying to figure out a good deck to pair this guy with, so I decided just to go with a fairy deck with Fairy Drop and then Xerneas BREAK to take advantage of the energy that you're going to be putting on Gumshoos anyway. But let's talk more about Gumshoos. So the ability is what makes this card good. The ability is what takes this card and takes it from like a very mediocre card and makes it a solid card. Once during your turn, you may have your opponent reveal their hand. Now this really doesn't give you like a plus or a minus or anything like that. It doesn't like give you an extra energy, it doesn't let you switch Pokemon, but having access to your opponent's hand and seeing what they have is ridiculously valuable in a lot of scenarios, particularly late game when you're trying to decide between an N or a Sycamore, or also when you're trying to decide which attacker to use, because if your opponent has the outs to get an attacker to take out like a Gumshoos, then okay, I'm going to attack with a Xerneas BREAK this turn. Or if your opponent has outs to, or if your opponent doesn't have outs to knock out a Xerneas, then you can be like, okay, then I'm fine with attacking with it. So really, looking at your opponent's hand, while it doesn't give you any plus immediately, gives you very valuable information, so you can kind of expect what your opponent's moves are going to be in their following turn. So very good ability. Headbutt Bounce, 3 energy for 100. Not horrible, but not great. Really, if it was like 120, it'd be so much better. But because it's 100, you're going to be like 3-hit KOing a ton of GX Pokemon. Like, all the other GXs have at least 200 HP. I mean, Umbreon and Espeon you can 2-shot, which is nice. But even like Gumshoos, Lurantis, you're going to have to 3-shot those guys, and that is not something that you want to be doing. So 100 for 3 energy, not horrible, but on a GX Pokemon, you really, even just 110 would be so much better. And then Gumshoos Chance GX, single energy, so very easy to use and very easy to power up. 10 damage base and does 50 more damage. times the number of energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So really, this is alright, my opponent powered up a Pokemon and is about ready to run through me. I'm just going to kind of use Gumshoos as an emergency safety valve. And just be like, okay, you have 4 energy on that Pokemon is now gone. So Gumshoe Chance, while not one of the best GX attacks, it's still a very solid GX attack and can be a deterrent to your opponent just powering up one thing, and then, I mean, if you delete it, then all of a sudden your opponent is just kind of left without any Pokemon. Well, Pokemon powered up, that is. But on to the rest of the deck. I'm only running a 2-2 of Yungoos and Gumshoos because while you can attack with Gumshoos, really I'm not intending it to be the main attacker. I'm intending for it to sit on the bench, reveal my opponent's hand every turn, and also be able to just use Gumshoe Chance to delete a Pokemon if it gets to be too much of a hassle. The Pokemon I'm pairing it with is Xerneas and Xerneas Break, the Geomancy Xerneas to be able to accelerate energy, and then Xerneas Break to be able to life stream because I'm going to be throwing DCEs on Gumshoos and Lugia, so you might as well take advantage of that with life stream, which does 20 damage times the number of energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So pretty weak early on, but pretty strong late game when you have a bunch of things powered up, especially with DCE, because just a DCE attachment gives you plus 40 damage, which is very valuable, and then also the fact that Xerneas Break is a 1-prize attacker. So I actually really like this combination right here. Not sure how competitive it's going to be. In fact, I actually think it's kind of not super competitive, but this is still a pretty cool combination, and also going second doesn't hurt this deck too much because you can just Geomancy to get more energy in play. So that's why I'm running 4-3 of Xerneas and Xerneas Break. I intend to have one Xerneas just Geomancy till it dies, get energy out onto the field for me, and at that point, once it dies, I will have Xerneas Breaks and Gumshoos attacking. I'm also pairing it with a Lugia because of Aero Ball. If I'm going to be throwing a bunch of energy onto the field and having a bunch of forms of energy acceleration, might as well just have Lugia there to build up a bunch of energy and also Aero Ball. Well, to build up a bunch of energy and Aero Ball, but also Deep Hurricane with just 4 energy onto it, hitting things for 150. That is just an amazing combination. So Lugia, I'm running it in a deck once again. I apologize, but Lugia just pairs well with a lot of the DCE oriented attackers in the Sun and Moon set. As for the items, running 4 Fairy Drop to kind of give Gumshoos a little more longevity. It won't be knocked out in one hit very often, so having Fairy Drop just be able to heal off damage because it has Fairy Energy attached is very, very nice. 4 Max Elixir to help accelerate energy, get those onto the field, and get attacking with Life Stream and Aero Ball. 1 Super Rod in case you have to like discard a bunch of Xerneas Break or Gumshoos with a Sycamore or Ultra Ball. 4 Trainers Mail to help with consistency, 4 Ultra Ball to get everything out. 4 VS Seeker to reuse all of our supporters, and as for the supporters, we have a very generic line. 4-2 of N and Sycamore, as usual. I mean, that's just my standard. 2 Lysandre, which is also my standard in a lot of decks, and then I'm running Hex Maniac as opposed to Ranger. I'm not using Ranger because you have a basic Pokemon to attack with Lugia, so really Jolteon Glaceon isn't a problem. Also against Regice, you're attacking with a Break and a GX, so you don't have to worry about EX Lock or anything like that. And then against Giratina, you're already hitting it for weakness, so you don't have to worry about not being able to attach DCEs because they will more often than not just get knocked out very, very quickly, because all you need is 5 energy to knock out a non-Fighting Fury belted one and 6 energy to knock out a Fighting Fury belted one, which really is not that hard in this deck with a combination of Geomancy, DCE, and Max Elixir. So don't need to worry about Pokemon Ranger. I am running 1 Hex Maniac to kind of slow my opponent down if I go first, because my deck really isn't reliant on abilities apart from just looking at my opponent's hand and then also Shaymin early game. So I can always just look at my opponent's hand, play down a Hex Maniac if I see that their only form of draw support is a Shaymin, and then go from there. So Gumshoos and Hex Maniac really has a pretty cool synergy, and I know a lot of people have been pairing Gumshoos with Team Skull Grunt, which I think that's kind of a cool pairing. I just decided to go less towards a disruption build of Gumshoos and more towards a, you know what, let's actually like attack with it and have a deck based around attacking with Gumshoos and another attacker, and then use its ability to our advantage with like just knowing what my opponent's gonna do, as opposed to being like, oh, I'm gonna disrupt my opponent. Because I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of disruption. I do acknowledge how successful it is in a lot of different formats. I mean, like, item lock in itself has propelled so many just medium level players to be able to top 8 at certain events. But I mean, that's beside the point. I'm not going to name names because I could not off the top of my head, and I don't want to disrespect anybody. But in general, I don't like disruption. That being said, I acknowledge its success. I decided to just go with a more generic build of Gumshoos with attacking as opposed to disruption. So that was the ultimate point of that. I was not intending to insult anybody, so I apologize if anybody was insulted by what I said. That was not what I meant. I was just saying that I acknowledge disruption's success. I just don't like it. But anyway, I'm done talking. I talk way too much. Let's go ahead and see this deck in action. Alrighty, we have found one against Thorhall with a Fire, Psychic, and Normal deck. So I'm actually pretty interested to see what my opponent is running. Don't usually see Fire with... well, you see Fire and Psychic, but you also usually see Water in there because that would indicate Hoopa. I start off with a pretty solid hand, assuming that I can get a draw supporter off of the Trainers Mail. My opponent... Okay, so we see the Fighting Fury belt. I'm still not sure what my opponent is running. But either way, start off with double Xerneas. That is pretty solid. I will get a mulligan card, so that is very nice. I get a... I get a Fairy Energy, and there's a Drowsy, so... Drowsy is usually paired with Snorlax, so, I mean, there's that. But, alright, I get a Sycamore. The question is, do I want to Sycamore away my hand? I mean, I'm going to go for the Max Elixir, obviously. I get 2 energy in play turn 1. Do I want to get rid of both of 2 Fairy Drops, my Super Rod and my DCE? Because those are really important resources to have later in the game. I'm like, you know what? Screw it, might as well. Let's see, Trainers Mail, grab an N, and then I'm going to Ultra Ball, I think. Let's see, what do I want to get rid of? I think I'm going to get rid of the Lysandre for sure, and then the Fairy Energies just so I have the N for next turn, because I'm not going to grab a Shaymin. I'm going to grab a Yungoos. I'm going to go ahead and get that thing into play, try to get an energy on it with Max Elixir, which I do hit. That is phenomenal. And now I have 3 energy in play. I'll be able to manually attach for a Xerneas Break attack next turn, and then I can just put the 2 Fairy Drops back in my deck and be in a great position. So really, really like my start. This was about as good as you could hope for, apart from, you know, discarding the valuable resources that you want later in the game. My opponent does put a Float Stone onto Drowsy, and then we see a Fire Energy, so... I mean, I guess this is like a Snorlax deck, but what's the Fire Pokemon? Why are you running Fire Energy? I mean, I can kind of see that with Scorched Earth, but don't you normally want to run... I don't even know. Because you wouldn't want to run All Night Party because you want Snorlax to stay asleep. But okay, I do get a DCE. You know, I'm just going to put it on the Yungoos and then pray that I can draw into a Fairy Garden plus a Gumshoos, which I do. That is really, really nice because I can play the Fairy Garden. Well, first I'm going to play the Xerneas Break onto my active Xerneas. I mean, it really didn't matter which one I was going to go for. Play the Fairy Garden, play the Shaymin, get a couple more cards. I mean, I don't need too much. I just need discard fodder to be able to get a Gumshoos, which I do get. Let's go ahead and Ultra Ball, get rid of the Hex Maniac, and a single Fairy Energy to grab that Gumshoos-GX so I can... Well, let's see, how many DCE do I have left? I have 1 DCE left in my deck. So that means 1's prized. I'm going to go ahead and get the Gumshoos-GX that will be able to knock out the Drowsy, play the Shaymin down, get 4 fresh cards, and then I can Ultra Ball for another Xerneas or really whatever I want. And then I'm first going to play the Max Elixir. Well, I mean, I don't hit it anyway, but I wanted to play the Max Elixir before I hit a Xerneas Break. And at this point, so I didn't draw into any way to get a supporter. So that's unfortunate. However, I will be able to take a prize. Going to Ultra Ball away my other Ultra Ball and the Gumshoos for yet another Xerneas, just so I can have those guys on the bench for really Max Elixir targets, actually. I want to make sure that I can Max Elixir into something that's decent. Let's see what my opponent's hand is. So we see the Snorlax and the Shaymin and the Fire Energy. They will be able to Birch's Observations, which I might point out my opponent got rewarded for running Birch's Observations. Just throwing that out there. And then I will Headbutt Bounce for 100 damage, take a prize, and be in a really good position, actually. Get another Fairy Energy. So while I won't be able to get any supporters or anything like that, I'll be in top deck mode, I won't be missing any attachments, which is actually the crucial part of this deck. You want to be able to attach every turn so you can be able to life stream for maximum amount of damage when you do need to. My opponent is just going to Shaymin, get a couple more cards, I guess. Yeah, go for the Acrobite, get rid of a Fighting Fury Belt. What would you be getting rid of a Fighting Fury Belt for? Because, I mean, Fighting Fury Belt would be absolutely crucial on Snorlax, and oh, I guess my opponent already had it anyway. Or they drew a Fighting Fury Belt, or 2 Fighting Fury Belts off of the Acrobike. One thing that is kind of cool about this deck is the fact that Gumshoos can knock out a fully powered up Snorlax with my GX attacks. So, that being said, I will want to almost exclusively attack with Xerneas Break until I'm able to, well, until my opponent sends up a powered up Snorlax and knocks out a Xerneas Break. I mean, I attacked with Gumshoos just because my opponent really, I was in no danger, and even then my opponent still can't not one-shot my Gumshoos unless they play like a plus power or a Kukui, but either way they already played the Sycamore for the turn. So Gumshoos is still able to one-shot the Snorlax while the Snorlax would not be able to one-shot me. And okay, I say one-shot the Snorlax because I mean I would be able to one-shot it once it's fully powered up. Otherwise, not so much. So Gumshoos was able to take a prize early. Ooh. My opponent gets an all-night party up. That's actually, I mean, that's good because my opponent won't be able to put my Gumshoos to sleep, so I'll still be able to knock out the Hypno. But it is bad that I won't have that free retreat, and if I don't have the free retreat, I won't be able to one-shot the Hypno next turn. So, well, if I have the free retreat, I won't be able to, if I don't have the free retreat, I'll have to use the DCE to retreat and won't be able to one-shot the Hypno. But, of course, my top deck is incredibly nice to me. I'm going to go ahead and play the Fairy Garden, get the Gumshoos out of dodge, be able to still one-shot this Hypno, and then also, I mean, might as well look at my opponent's hand just because. Let's see what they got. Birch's Observations, DCE, another all-night party. So it's good that I was able to, it's good that I retreated when I did, and then let's just knock out the Hypno with a life stream, get a prize card. It's another Xerneas, so still in top deck mode for a supporter. However, at this point, I mean, I'm one-shotting Shaymin. Snorlax, when it gets powered up completely, will be one-shot by Gumshoos. So it's really, I don't know, I'm just in a phenomenal position. I mean, my opponent is looking to get that Snorlax fully powered up, and actually is fully powered up at this point. They will be able to knock out my Xerneas if they do, well, if they manage to retreat the Shaymin into the Snorlax. And so, alright, in a really good spot, my opponent will Sycamore again. At this point, they're getting to a pretty low deck size. I mean, they're down to 9, and they haven't taken a single prize yet. I will be able to knock out the Shaymin in one hit. And oh, we see a Charizard come down. So that's interesting pairing with Snorlax. I'm not sure why, I'm not sure what the synergy is there, but I mean, it's still kind of a cool backup attack. I mean, Snorlax is a GX, Charizard's an EX. I mean, if you're going to run Fire Energy, then you might as well throw something in that'll use it. I'm going to be able to one-shot the Shaymin. Let's get another Xerneas powered up. Gumshoos to look at my opponent's hand, see what they have. A couple DCE, VS Seeker, so I'm not in any danger, and I will be able to knock out the Shaymin, but unfortunately my opponent won't let me. They're just going to forfeit, and that is kind of unfortunate. I would have liked to have gotten another hit off, but either way, Gumshoos would have been able to revenge the Snorlax if it came in and knocked out a Xerneas, but either way, pretty solid first match. You saw exactly what this deck is designed to do. Get energy up, use Gumshoos to look at my opponent's hand, and then Xerneas until you need to attack with Gumshoos, and then Gumshoos can also attack pretty early anyway. But yeah, pretty good first match, but unfortunately way too short, so let's go ahead and try to find another one with this deck. Alrighty, we have found another one against Zara with a, oh, it's a Dragon Steel. I don't even know what my opponent's running, but either way, we do see the Dragon, so we should have the type advantage unless it's one of those older dragons that is just weak to Dragon. We start off with a very nice hand. This is a very solid hand. I can attach the energy manually to Xerneas. I can Ultra Ball away the Lysandre and the Hex Maniac for a Shaymin. I can Trainers Mail, hopefully get something else, and then I can Shaymin up, and then even Shaymin up again if I have to with the Ultra Balls later. So this is very, very solid opening hand. I'm curious to see what my opponent is running, because you don't often see Steel Dragon. I mean, you did when it was like Bronzong, Giratina, Tyrantrum. You saw it with that deck, but Bronzong has been rotated out, so I'm curious what the Steel type is. Hoopa, the Psychic type's probably Hoopa to bring out the Giratinas, and probably Darkrai. I didn't see Dark in that in the list of types, so that could just be one that my opponent is running it. Okay. Oh, I see what this is. This is a Solgaleo Giratina deck, probably. Or I'm assuming it's Giratina. I could be wrong. Could not be Giratina. But what I am going to do is attach the energy, Trainer's Mail, see what I can get. I get another Ultra Ball. So I'm going to go through 3 Ultra Ball turn 1. And then I could Ultra Ball for a Gumshoos. That way I can Shaymin for 6. But I'm just going to Shaymin for 3, see what I can get. I get a Yungoos right there. Let's Ultra Ball, get rid of, I think, a VS Seeker and the other Ultra Ball. Or no, the other Ultra Ball and the Hex Maniac, because I can always just VS Seeker. Do I want to grab... No, I don't want to grab a Xerneas. I want to grab a Shaymin because I don't have a draw supporter yet. So let's Shaymin, hopefully get a draw supporter or something like that. I've gone through a third of my deck and... Alright, still no supporter. So that is very unfortunate. But what I am going to do right here is... I'm going to hang on to the Ultra Ball, actually. I don't want to go through all of them. And I am just going to Hex Maniac, hopefully slow my opponent down. And worst case scenario, I just... manually attach a DCE next turn, hope to hit a Max Elixir, and then Ultra Ball for a Gumshoos to be able to knock out this Cosmog. So a pretty slow start, go through almost half my deck and haven't gotten a draw supporter yet. But I mean, that does happen sometimes. Hopefully my opponent will end me into a hand that I can work with a little bit better than this. I Shaymin twice, got nothing off of that. But either way, I mean, it's not a horrible position because worst case scenario, I can just Geomancy, try to get a bunch of energy onto the field and go from there. But otherwise, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. My opponent is just going to Nest Ball. We do see the Giratina, so it's confirmed a Solgaleo Giratina deck, which is really, really cool. I got past a really cool list for a Solgaleo Darkrai Giratina deck that I'm going to be showcasing in the future. But because I just showcased Solgaleo a little while ago, I'm not necessarily in any hurry to do that. And my opponent does N. That is fantastic. I'll get a fresh hand of 6. Hopefully get a draw supporter. And there we go. There's a Sycamore. So this is something I can definitely work with. Get a Xerneas Break. So what I am going to do is immediately play that sucker down. And the question is, how do I want to play this? So I get a Max Elixir. That definitely works. That works. I'm going to see if I hit it before I decide what to do next, which I do. So what I think I'm going to try to do is just actually Sycamore away my hand after I play the Fairy Garden, of course. Sycamore away my hand, try to draw into a way of getting a Gumshoos and a DCE. Get the Gumshoos, but no DCE. So I will just Geomancy this turn. I mean, admittedly, I got a little greedy. So I am just going to Geomancy, put energy onto the Gumshoos and the other Xerneas. Yeah. So, did get greedy. I should have just attached the energy to the Xerneas Break and then knocked out the Cosmog. But, yeah, again, got greedy. Sorry about that. Either way, I mean, it's not a bad thing to just continually Geomancy until I knock some stuff out. I mean, my opponent... Wow, I forgot to use Gumshoos' ability. But that's what I get for not playing a deck a lot. I just kind of... That's an ability that I just kind of forget about because you really... the only way you benefit is looking at your opponent's hand. Like, you don't get an extra energy, you don't get an extra card. I mean, don't get me wrong. Looking at your opponent's hand is a phenomenal ability. That ability is incredible. I'm just saying that, like, that's not one that affects your board state in any way. It affects how you play, but it doesn't affect your board state. Okay, my opponent does have a Giratina completely powered up. What I am hoping to do is get a way of getting a regular energy onto the board this turn, of drawing a Fairy Energy. That way I can attach it to my Xerneas, Lysandre, and the Giratina and knock that sucker out with a Life Stream. Otherwise, I can just, again, go for another Geomancy and go from there. So, either way, my opponent does get a Cosmoem up. So, actually, I'm going to hold off on attacking the Giratina, I think, yeah, oh, thank the Lord. What I am going to do first is VS Seeker, Super Rod back into energy. I just need to draw one of them. I want to knock out this Cosmoem because Solgaleo will be infinitely more difficult to knock out for this deck than a Giratina. Giratina I can hit for weakness. Solgaleo is going to have 250 HP. I mean, that's just going to be a bad time for me to try to knock out. First thing I'm going to do is Trainers Mail, because that increases my odds of being able to hit the Max Elixir, which I'm hoping to get this turn. Let's go ahead and do that. With it, not a big deal. I am just going to throw the energy onto my active... what do I want to do? Because Gumshoos is going to have like 4 energy on it if I attach the DCE, which I think I'm going to do. And my opponent just has Sycamores and Metal Energy, so what I am just going to do is live stream, knock out that Cosmoem, because as far as I know, my opponent does not have a way of getting a Solgaleo, and I guess, yeah, so I guess they were counting on the Ultra Ball, getting them the Solgaleo for next turn and being able to, I think it was like Soul Burst GX is what its attack is, but either way, Xerneas able to come through, live stream, knocking out my opponent's really only means of getting significant damage and getting a significant board setup, because I would have been able to just steamroll through the Giratinas with my Xerneas Break, because I would be able to one-shot them while they'd have to two-shot me, and I'd be taking 2 prizes to their 1. So yeah, another short match, but another good setup, so I'm going to try to find one more, see if we can get a solid match with this deck. Alrighty, we have found a third game that will hopefully bring something. Hopefully we'll be able to get a good match out of this against a Psychic and normal deck, so I'm interested to see what my opponent is running. It could be that Espeon Lunala deck that everybody seems to be running around, or it could be like just a generic Mewtwo and Garbodor deck. I do start off with, again, I start off with a pretty amazing hand. Wow, that is really awesome. Jeez, I'm loving this hand. Because I'll be able to immediately get a, yeah, I'll be able to get another Xerneas up. My opponent plays a Rangaroo, so I have no idea what my opponent's running. Get another Max Elixir. That is pretty nice. So I could, actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and Ultra Ball. Get rid of the Ultra Ball and the Sycamore to grab a Shaymin, because I'm going to Shaymin for 6. Like, that's already a foregone conclusion. I'm going to Shaymin for 6, play the energy onto my Xerneas, and then double Max Elixir onto my Yungoos. Missed the first one. Can I hit the second one? I do. So that is actually fine, because I'd have to play, odds are I'd be playing the DCE onto the Gumshoos anyway, or the Yungoos anyway, so that's not a big deal. And okay, so, yeah, definitely not going to want a Sycamore this turn. I mean, I draw into what I really would like to see next turn. Because, I mean, I'd love to have a Xerneas Break and a Gumshoos next turn, but at this point, I'm just going to pass, because I don't want to Sycamore away 2 DCEs and then 2 of my evolutions. I'm just going to hold on to my hand, make it look like I have nothing, so my opponent potentially won't end, or they might try to discard more resources because they think that I won't have anything. So, I don't know. I'm just going to kind of sit on it for now. And my opponent is going to play a Hoopa. This is a Mewtwo deck. Okay, so if they're running a Rangaroo, I'm not sure if they would have the room for a... I'm not sure if they'd have room for a Garbodor. Either way, I mean, my opponent's just playing Mewtwo's on the bench. It looks like, yeah, it looks like my opponent's not going to go for a Garbodor at all, because they are just going to load up the bench with Mewtwo. And I mean, that last spot could go to a Garbodor, but okay, my opponent will just Sycamore away their hand. Hopefully it was a couple good resources. It was a DCE. Ooh, that was nice to see. I always like to see when my opponent has to get rid of DCEs. That is just gorgeous for me. My opponent will Max Elixir. It's curious that they're running Max Elixir over Mega Turbo. I mean, they could still be running Mega Turbo. It's just usually you see one form of acceleration or the other, and not necessarily both. I mean, there still could be room for both, but you just don't necessarily see both. My opponent will just pass the turn. That is fine. I get an N, so I can potentially save my DCE if I want to, but given that my opponent has a hand of 4, I'm probably just going to go ahead and Sycamore. Yeah, I think I'm just going to Sycamore. You know what I could have done? I could have Gumshoosed and looked at my opponent's hand, but you know what? At this point, it's not that big of a deal. Let's see if I can get a Fairy Garden. I do not. What do I want to grab? I think I'm just going to grab a Fairy Drop at this point, because, I mean, that's what you want to do. And then I'm going to Geomancy, get energy onto Xerneas, and then I don't want to get another energy on Gumshoos, because then my opponent would be able to knock it out with Mewtwo, or have an easier time knocking it out with Mewtwo. So I am just going to attach energy to the Shaymin, get some more stuff on board, and then honestly, this way I can just Lysandre in, the Mewtwo next turn if my opponent manages to get a Mega Mewtwo set up, and my opponent gets a 4th Mewtwo and another energy and a Mega Mewtwo. So my opponent would have to have another energy in order to be able to one-shot my Xerneas Break, and if my opponent goes into that, then I would be able to knock it out with my Gumshoos this turn. Or next turn, and my opponent does just Sycamore, because they had another Sycamore in hand, so probably should have just end to see that my opponent had 2 Sycamores, but either way, at least my opponent doesn't get that much going before they have to Sycamore. And then we see another Max Elixir. Opponent doesn't hit it, that is pretty nice. And on the bright side, I do have a couple Fairy Drops, so if my opponent does hit my Xerneas for some good damage, I can double Fairy Drop, get off, heal off a good amount of damage, and then, you know, go into Gumshoos and potentially knock out my opponent. I probably will just live stream to get some good damage on it, and then I can, like, do the headbutt bounce or whatever. And then you see the Mega Turbo as well. That is really, really interesting. I have never... Well, I don't want to say I've never seen that, but that's just very unusual, because you don't generally run both forms of acceleration. And on the bright side, I'll be able to save my Xerneas Break and my Gumshoos. This Xerneas will go down, but because my opponent put 4 energy onto that Mega Mewtwo, Gumshoos is going to be able to one-shot it. And that is exactly what I want. Oh my gosh, I get another Fairy Drop. Really do not want to get rid of all 3 Fairy Drops. So, alright, my opponent doesn't have much. Yeah, my opponent really doesn't have anything. I mean, he could Lysandre, but at this point, I mean, Gumshoos is just going to be able to do a Gumshoe Chance GX, knock out this Mega Mewtwo in one shot, and just like that, my opponent's big attacker that he spent so many resources loading up is just gone. All of my opponent's Max Elixirs were gone. My opponent had to use a Mega Turbo as well. I mean, just all that knocked out by a Gumshoos. So, yeah. In the end, I mean, really didn't get too many... Well, we really didn't get any long matches, but as it turned out, Donald Trump GX just put up a wall that my opponents could not break through. I apologize, that was a horrible joke. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. Leave your answer to the question of the day in the comment section below. And this is Styx, signing out. Why not? See you guys.